Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast brought to you by RaceForThePrize.com. It's the Sunday show, Chicago street race. We had a good Xfinity race yesterday. The big takeaway was that good cars were able to work their way forward. We have to be careful with that analysis because, as we know, in the Xfinity series, there is a disparity in equipment, so it's easier for a good car to make it forward, and there's a disparity in talent. So we will see a SVG or a Larson easily walk through the field. That's not the case in the Cup Series. The equipment is pretty equal. This car was designed with road racing in mind, and the result, as I talked about earlier in the week on the podcast, always check those out, is that this car's easier to drive, meaning the talent level there's a lot more parity. It's not as hard, so the guys that are really good at it can't really separate as much from the drivers that aren't that good because the car has been built to make it easier. It's not necessarily the case in the Xfinity Series, and also we have a just straight up disparity in equipment and talent in the Xfinity Series. So, yes, the cream rise to the top yesterday. Today, it's not going to be as easy. Now, I think Martin Truex Jr. could probably get there, but it's not going to be just swimming right through like we saw with Van Gisbergen or with Kyle Larson. In the data that we're looking at, the 4 laps, best 4 laps is the data that I'm focusing on. You're going to see that after we get out of this top tier, which we would expect Larson and Gibbs and SVG look like they're really good. And then there's kind of a secondary tier of drivers, and there are no real surprises, maybe other than Bubba Wallace, that we think could slot in right behind them and maybe even threat or challenge for the win. But then once we get past that and we're looking around 10 to 25, these cars are all very equal. I mean, we look at the average of the best 4 laps, 88.2, 88.2, 88.2, 88.2, 88.2, 88.1. Saying that more than Venmo, PayPal, Cash App if you want to look at the full range of data. Right? Say 88.2 on repeat. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. It's in the description below if you want to get access to the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet. So if they're all equal, it makes it quite challenging to decide, well, who actually is going to move forward. Then we add in the circumstances of road course racing, stage breaks, cautions, flipping to the front, getting cycled to the back, some guys chasing points. Ultimately, you can't worry too much about that. Now, the good news to that, which might mitigate the stage breaking and cautions impacting the grid, is that most of the crew chiefs are projecting this to be a one-stop race. And so fewer stops means fewer opportunities to flip stages, fewer opportunities to play games like we saw with the shenanigans last year or that we've seen at other road courses in the past. That's kind of nice. And that leans more back towards, okay, well, if you were fast in practice, if you have a fast car, if you're a good road racer, if we take out less of the gimmicks, less of the volatility of stage madness and strategy, then it's just the best are going to get there. The problem with that is that there really is not a huge difference between those drivers around, say, 8 to 22. That's where the challenge comes in. So what we can do is, what we probably will do is simply chase place differential and hopefully pick the driver that has the best day. And again, it's going to be challenging because they are all equal. So if they are all equal and they're all pretty close, and they've all got a shot, and we know who we like at the top, then from there, it seems like the play for the Chicago street race is going to be chase place differential. So what I've done is just put in a simple projection of, all right, these guys can all win. These guys probably could win. We'll just put them in at third. And then we have a whole bunch that could be top 10. So I've just placed in 8th place position among these 88s and up. You want to expand your range a little bit further, that's fine. But to me, there is not a lot of difference between these cars. They're all pretty equal. And so they all have just as good of a shot. And if at the end of the day we're trying to score fantasy points, then we want the place differential and we're going to go towards the back. So if we just take their salary and we give them all a top 10 finish, we'll say 8th, calculate their place differential that they can score for each driver. And then we kind of, what we're doing here is taking the place differential and comparing that to price. So you can just look for raw points if you aren't really worried about salary in the lineup that you're building. For example, you're going to overpay a little bit for William Byron, 19 place differential points at 9,400. That comes out, if we were to calculating it based on, all right, I need to be more cost conscious, he's giving us a 2.0. So 19 place differential points divided by what we're doing is 9.4, just to get a sort of rate. Who rates out as the best place differential point per dollar play? Not looking at we're giving them all the same finishing position, by the way. So that leaves us with this crew. And the guys that are checking off on the top are Austin Hill in the RCR car, who plenty of road course experience, road course win in the truck series, has a pretty solid RCR car, and he's showing up as your best point per dollar play aside from Josh Berry, who, again, maybe not the greatest road course racer, but he's right there at 88 with this whole crew. Sure, it would be better to see him be a little bit faster, but we're talking about tenths here. Not a huge difference. And he is starting in the back at 36, so he's giving you the best point per dollar place differential if you're looking for value. Next would be Austin Hill. Again, point per dollar wise, these guys are checking out. Now, the odds that he finishes 8th, probably a bit of a stretch. So you dial that down, but even if you cut it in half, he's still going to be 2x in terms of place differential, which is comparable to a William Byron, which makes him a very solid value pick. So then you got Barry. We also have AJ Allmendinger over that 3 mark, and Zane Smith as well. The Spire vehicles all look pretty solid, as we're seeing the Spires all up here in terms of speed being similar. Corey LaJoy, Carson Hosever. So those are probably your top value picks. I'm not saying I'm going to put 4 of those guys in my lineup, but those would be the obvious places to check based on this strategy of these cars are all equal and the best will eventually get there. And if they're all pretty close, then they'll have a shot. So you probably might put 1 or 2 of these drivers in your lineup. The ultimate, and they're all starting pretty far back. So it's just going to be, who do you like? Now, obviously, Austin Hill is a little bit fastest, but then you go to AJ Allmendinger, who has plenty of experience. Zane Smith, a little less experience, but probably goes a little bit lower owned, maybe costs you a little bit more. You got to wait and see on that. Josh Berry, not the most experienced road course racer, but just fast enough, starting deep in the field and slightly cheaper. Austin Hill's probably going to be the number 1 guy. AJ, at his price, still slotting out pretty good, but I don't know if he necessarily is going to give you a value play, right? It's just he comes in as a good point per dollar with his poor starting position. I think Austin Hill is where most people are going to go, and then I think they will ultimately give Josh Berry a shot, saying that, well, he's not the greatest road course racer, but this is just a whole different mix. It's just a whole different ball game, right? This isn't Sonoma. This isn't Watkins Glen. The experience that he lacks is not experience that other drivers necessarily have. Then we go up to some of the drivers that are more likely to get into the top 10, and they're going to cost you more. Martin Truex Jr., everyone knows he's a good road course racer. His speeds are there. Starting 24th, should be a pretty popular, safer place differential chase. Chase Briscoe, the problem with chasing his place differential is that maybe he runs for stage points, and you're going to want to check Twitter later on in the day, see if they kind of reveal their hand that they're not going to flip stages, they're not going to pit early, and if that's the case, then you can definitely downgrade him some. William Byron has issues in practice. I'm not too worried there. starting 27th. I prefer Truex, but Byron also giving you more of a guarantee of finishing position. LaJoie looked decent enough. Is he starting far enough back? He gives you savings, helps you kind of differentiate from some of these other guys that if you want to get off of Austin Hill, you don't believe in, or you think he's going to be too popular, LaJoie is going to go a lot lower owned because he's simply not giving you the place differential. But as we mentioned, the cars look good. But again, all of these cars look good enough. And if the deciding factor is place differential, then maybe you are being a little too cute. Maybe being a little less cute is going to Todd Gilliland. Fine road course racer in the Truck Series, speed's there, has the teammate to lean on in Michael McDowell, can get it done, get you a little bit more place differential, get you off of the Austin Hill. It's going to cost you a little bit more, but I think the way that the salaries are pretty flat this week, it's not going to be a problem. Pretty aggressive projection for Blaney. I'm not huge on Blaney. Suarez is likely just starting too close to the front. Same thing with Carson Hocevar, probably starting too close to the front. Nemechek, he's faster, but really not by that much, and he's not going to give you place differential. Now, Chase Elliott's in a more interesting situation where, yeah, you're going to have to pay up, but he ultimately could do a lot better than 8th. Again, this is pretty arbitrary saying, all right, Reddick can get 3rd, and at a 10th slower, Elliott's 8th. Now, Elliott has to get through traffic, whereas Reddick doesn't, but Elliott is very capable of a top 5. So you could boost that up a little bit, and you could put him in the conversation with Truex, put him in the conversation with William Byron. Ultimately, I believe Truex and Byron will garner more ownership. Again, the speeds are pretty much the same. So if we're chasing PD, we're chasing PD. Then really from these top guys, which all could kind of crash the winning lineup, you've got a very affordable Alex Bowman who could scrape off some fast laps and could get to 3rd. And yeah, he's not a part of that place differential crew, but he likely will go under-owned. Denny Hamlin is going to get you a little bit more place differential, but again, the speeds aren't really all that much different. If we think that Larson, Gibbs, and SVG have the elite cars, again, there could be stage cycling to a small extent where someone could get out front and lead for a little while, but as long as these guys don't fall too far down the grid, and I would imagine that most of them are chasing wins, so they will pit before the end of stages. They shouldn't lose track position too much and be in a position where they can always kind of rise back to the top. If they always get right back up to the top, then that really limits the amount of laps led from some of these middle range drivers. But again, Bell, Reddick, McDowell all have the talent to get to the front and have a good day and lead laps. But ultimately, if we're trusting the data, it looks like Larson, Gibbs, and SVG should control it. Really makes it harder to roster these drivers. I wouldn't completely eliminate them. You got 6 spots to fill, but the easiest and safest way seems to be to chase the place differential among these drivers that are all pretty equal. You want to expand it down to Keselowski, I wouldn't. He's starting too close to the front. Maybe go after Busch. I think once you get down here, I'm not really all that interested. That's pretty much going to do it. Wanted to approach this in a kind of a different routine, make it quick, and give you a basic strategy and give you some data here that I think and hope that you will appreciate. Again, to sum up, good cars can get forward, but the problem is they're all good cars for the most part. I don't know if stages are going to be as big of a factor. You just never can predict that. And if that is the case, then that leans even more into playing these place differential drivers. So it's place differential chasing for me. Gave it the drivers that I think are the most interesting. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks for joining me. Trip to Life Fantastic.